competition is for losers. The point is that you try to dominate a particular element in the market, and then you use the benefits that you get from that, like the excess returns, to go into other markets, adjacent markets. Things I'm thinking when I'm like driving to the office or driving home now is like, okay, is there something by which you can measure how good somebody is in prompt engineering? I love asking the question like, hey, if you need to present at the end of the year like one slide to your management or your board of directors on like the return on investment, it's like you paid this much for DataCamp, like what do you need to show? And then we work backwards from there.
Welcome to another episode of the Employee Experience Apps podcast from the Munich Podcast Studios. Employee experience podcasts are about HR tech, employee experience, shared services, and other interesting topics around HR and the workplace. We are currently running 2 different seasons at the same time because they intersect and influence each other. One season is about startups and young experience tech companies. The other season is about AI. Today's episode is about both. It's about DataCamp, a young experience-focused tech company that has the mission to democratize data and AI. I had the honor to talk to Martijn Theuwissen, data enthusiast and co-founder of DataCamp. DataCamp by now is more than 10 years in the business and has come already quite a long way. But what you will hear from our conversation is that there is so much more potential for the next 10 years. I was intrigued by DataCamp's story because it truly focuses on what I believe is important today and when it comes to skills also tomorrow, data literacy and AI literacy. But let me pause here and not too much about everything that him and I talked about. Listen for yourself. Enjoy the next episode with Martijn. Hi! Welcome, Martijn. It's so great to have you. It's one of our great podcast episodes, and today we have Martijn from DataCamp with us. Thank you so much for your time. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Volker. Yeah, I'm doing great. It's unfortunately this rainy day here in Belgium. I'm working from the Belgium office of DataCamp, but all in all, I definitely can't complain. Things are going very well here.
That's good. Yeah, you're already saying from the Belgium office of DataCamp. DataCamp by now is a quite big organization. You have offices in multiple different places. But before we talk about DataCamp and before talking about what DataCamp is about and why it is so interesting, let's start with you, Martijn, because you are one of the founders. So before we go there, who is Martijn and what's your background?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Martijn. I'm from Belgium. The Flemish part, so I speak Dutch. So for those of the listeners who don't know, Belgium is split into a French-speaking part and a Dutch-speaking part. We have a tiny German-speaking part as well, actually.
I didn't know that.
So I'm from the Flemish part, and I grew up close to the Dutch border. I studied what they call business economics, or business engineering. So in essence, it combines engineering subjects with the more commercial subjects like economics, like marketing, but we also had physics and electricity and so on. And so the idea is that we can form the bridge between the engineering, the product departments, and the commercial folks. So that's what I studied here in Belgium, and then. After that, I started working in a commercial role at Coca-Cola. It's a company I never need to explain.
No, everyone knows it.
Everyone knows it.
The question, though, Martijn, is: was it that Coca-Cola company, TCCC, or was it the bottler organization?
So it was the bottler organization, actually. So it's the bottler organization of part of Western Europe and the UK. So it's a conglomerate, but it was the bottling division. I did that for a year, and then I went straight actually into DataCamp.
Wow!
And we started, and that's around 10 years ago.
Yes.
And that's a bit about me.
Amazing. So what What made you quit Coca-Cola and found a company like DataCamp? What was your motivation behind it? Did you always want to be like self-employed and had an idea, or how did it all come to play?
Sure. So there are actually a couple of components there. So I've always been interested in things that have to do with education. Like as of a young age, I was very active in everything that to do with student representation and those kind of things. I think first time was like when I was 12 or 13 years old. And I always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial element into me. I think I was just always thinking about like how can I make money. Like I was at some point, I
Are
was
we
think
all thinking
15.
that?
Yeah, well, I was 15, 16. I was obsessed with these with stock trading, and I was like making my own little programs, which is like 20 years ago. So back then, you needed to go to these obscure forums and things like that. So I was like I always had a little bit that element, and then at Coca-Cola, I actually like I realized that I'm probably I tend to joke like unemployable in a large organization. Um, the and it has nothing to do with Coca-Cola because actually like okay, I actually in that year I learned a lot. Like they allowed me to do sales, which I think is very important at the start of your career. I they treated their employees very well. It's just like the hierarchy and the element of like um you only win when somebody else loses, like because it's like if
Yeah,
somebody at the top gets
yeah,
fired or leaves, like that's when like everyone else moves up, rather like in a small company, like if the small company grows, it's much more likely new jobs get
yeah,
created, you get opportunities that way.
yeah.
And that's so that's like that played. And then I was lucky to have co-founders that brought some of the other passions. So I think we all have these entrepreneurial passion, but so one of the co-founders who's now the CEO, Jonathan, he taught statistics at school, so that's like where the data science component came from. And yeah, then everything came a little bit together.
That's fantastic. Do you know Professor Scott Galloway?
Yes, I do.
He has a very similar story. He was also like, I started in a company, but basically I was unemployable, so I had to
I
found
didn't
my
know
own
that.
company.
I should trademark that joke
Yeah, it's
before he does.
yeah, exactly. But you had good company there.
No, that's true. That's true.
No,
He
good.
actually
Yeah.
he actually writes quite a lot about education
Yes.
as well, and the value versus non-value of
Mm.
what he then I believe called second tier and third tier universities versus
Yes.
first tier.
Yes. And how much you have to, particularly in the US, how much you have to invest in it versus what it pays off, and is it a luxury good or is it a
Yeah,
commodity? And it's interesting, but not for today. Today is
not
about
for today.
DataCamp. So
Sure.
now we know why you went into founding your own company with your co-founders. What made you found then particularly DataCamp? What is DataCamp about? Maybe we start there. What is DataCamp about? And then we go into why did you found something like this? What was the mission? What was the original idea behind it?
Yeah. So the team is like okay, we want to democratize data skills, and today we say we want to democratize data and AI skills. And as I said at the start, so one of the co-founders was actually teaching at university, and they taught statistics, and they taught statistics using a particular programming language called
Mhm.
R. So just the
Yeah.
letter
Yes.
R. It
Yeah.
was very much used in academics at
Yes.
that point.
Yes.
And at the same time, you like it was a year like 2013, 2014, something like that. You also had these massive open online courses. These
Mm-hmm.
companies like Coursera, EDX, they came up, and it was the year of the MOOC, year of the massive open online course. But you also had these at that time tinier companies, startups. I think Duolingo is a really good example
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
rather than going very broad and saying like, okay, we have courses
on everything,
product management, design, history, whatever you want. We're going to focus on a particular skill set. In their case, it was languages. For us, it was data science. But we are going to create the best learning interface to teach that subject. So rather than putting the instructor or the teacher at the center of attention, which you do with like a Coursera or a Udemy, because it's all it's all a film, it's a movie, it's a video. We're going to put the individual at the center, and we're going to build technology around it that makes that individual, the learner, better. And so that's like it's that combination of ideas from other sectors combined with the backgrounds that we had ourselves, and that then made DataCamp. Now, we didn't call DataCamp from the beginning. We actually were first called Academy, so the letter R. Because our very first focus was actually just to teach people R,
the language.
How do you program in R? And then at some point we were like, okay, we need to make this, like, we need to think broader. There were other languages, and so like, okay, that's how it then became broader. But so like the very first thing was, hey, we're going to teach people how to work with R.
That's fantastic. Now, you already said it was, more than 10 years back, around 2013. My memory, I'm also getting old, might not be the best anymore, but I think the actual drive and the actual need on data science, particularly in the business, came only a bit later. Were you just lucky, or did you see it coming, that hype and the need for data science skills in the wider workforce?
Yeah, so there's this famous quote where like, okay, when what is it? Luck is when preparation and or opportunities when luck and preparation come together, or something like that. Or success. I think it's a bit of that. So, are we lucky in the sense that we are in an industry that has only seen tremendous growth in the last 10 years? Like, you went from R, and then Python and SQL became bigger. Then you had the BI tools like a Tableau, a Power BI, a Looker. Now you have data literacy, you have AI, everything surrounding that. So like we've been lucky in the sense that more and more there are external ways beyond DataCamp that made it clear how important it is that people build these skills, these data and AI skills. And we were then, and I think then where it's not luck is that, okay, we always executed to be in the position that we could serve those needs. So I think it's that combination that that made us where we are today. That's how we went from just R to like all the tools that we have today.
All the variety, So you still are very much in one topic, but the different tools around it, you stayed focused on in that sense.
Yeah, the thing is like we are in one field, but the field broadened. So where 7 years ago, if you wanted to get some data analysis done, you needed to go to the IT department or the data science department, if there was a data science department, and you say like, hey, I got this data from like the purchase department. I want to do a quick analysis on it. Like, can you do that for me? And you got put in the queue, and well, you needed to wait. Today, these tools are much broader available. Like, if you work in marketing, chances are extremely high that you can use some kind of data analytical tool. And so you can use your own expertise on the field, on the marketing field, combined with the basic skill of like, okay, how do I work with this data? What kind of analysis I can do on it to do it yourself, rather than going like 5-6 years ago to the department. And I think that's a big shift. So it's the field itself became a much more standardized skill. Like I tend to make the comparison with 40 years ago, nobody like knew how to use a computer, and all of a sudden like that was like a requirement. If you walk into an office space now, everyone is using a computer, probably like for people are using 2 or 3 computers. And 20 years ago, like, okay, everyone needed to learn how to start writing emails and serve the internet. Like I still remember my parents going to, and myself as well, going to computer classes. This is probably 25, 30 years ago, to computer classes where they like explain to you like, hey, this is how you send an email.
Yes.
But today nobody like thinks about when they are interviewing somebody for a job, like, hey, can you write an email?
Yeah.
Like, no, there's an assumption that everyone knows it. It's
Yeah.
become this basic skill. And I think with data, we're moving towards the same situation where there's more and more going to be an assumption that you know how to work to a degree or understand to a degree what does this bar chart mean?
Yeah.
Or like, how do I use Excel? Those kind of things. Sorry, I've been rambling.
No. And I think, Martin, this is exactly where one of the interesting topics comes around your mission, right? Your mission is to democratize data and AI skills. What does this practically mean for you, democratizing these skills?
So it means, from a practical point of view, it means that, okay, you have in your role a certain problem statement that can be solved with data. And we want you to have the skills to solve that problem yourself, or at least have the understanding so that you could have meaningful conversations with the people who can solve that problem for you. So let me give you an example.
Yeah.
Of both. So if I'm a marketeer and I run performance marketing advertisements on like on Google, on Facebook, they give you a lot of data, and I can probably with some like basic analysis, like get some additional insights out of that. Like, okay, how are these different ads doing compared to the ads that I've run like a month ago? Those kind of things. So we want you to have the skills to do these basic statistical techniques using the tools, whether it's a programming language, whether it's a business intelligence tools, whether it's AI today, that you can do that. And then an example of the second one is like, I'm a manager or I'm a leader, and I hear all this buzz around AI today. And so, or I hear all this buzz around machine learning. Like, that was a craze like 2 years ago, and deep learning was 3 or 4 years ago. What do I do with this?
Yeah.
So we want to equip those people with the necessary, like, I tend to say, like, so that they're dangerous enough to be in a room with data scientists or data analysts to ask the right questions. And we want to equip them with that skill level. So not that they go in and make their own machine learning model, but that they can say like, hey, our business needs this. I read somewhere that machine learning can help here. I'm going to sit in the room with the data scientist and I'm going to have a meaningful conversation. Okay, and they will do the implementation.
And so there are, and you are saying this, there are basically two parts to it, right? Number one is you need to start off with a hypothesis. And then you need to know if, and in broad strokes, how this hypothesis can be looked at from a data perspective or from a AI ML perspective, if we go there. Are you also helping in the former space, like basically building the muscle so that regular employees, regular managers know what kind of questions to ask?
Yeah. So before and after the actual analytical part, doing the analysis, there are like important like prep work and post work as well. And that's what I mean with the data literacy component. That's where we focus on those areas. So for example, we have whole courses on like, okay, how do you ask like business questions from like a data perspective that we think can be solved with data, and so we have whole courses on that. Similarly, like at the end of the process, we have courses around data storytelling, because it's one thing to get to the results. The other thing is like, okay, how do you like make sure that these results like now translate to action? How do you phrase that? How do you like, what can you show? Like, it's probably not useful to give people like 100-page boring report with all the statistical techniques that are used. Like, okay, how can we make this? And so we very much focus on the first and the last part as well. Now, going back to an earlier question of that you asked around the evolution of DataCamp and like the democratizing, this is when we started 10 years ago and we started on the R programming language, we didn't know that we would end up here and that these things would become so important. And so that's also part of the evolution of ourselves, of the space. Like, okay, these things, just because of its widespread adoption, it just became way more important to focus on those things as well.
That's interesting, Martin. And if you don't mind, let me ask a question a bit around that. You know, my audience is not only experienced and HR folks, but also people that, you know, are thinking themselves about a startup and how to do that. And what the point that you are making there now is, I think, a very important one, right? You start out with one idea, with one thing, but you keep open and you see what actually has an impact, what makes sense, which direction to go. There is not the set plan, right? So how do you go about that? And particularly for DataCamp, what would you say, you know, how often did you change course or took a different pathway in the last 10 years?
Yeah, so major course changes we never really did. There were like insights of like, hey, we initially thought like, hey, we can build a business around just R, and then like a year later you come to the insight like, hey, this is going to be much broader. But it's not that at some point we were doing data, but we're going to pivot towards languages or something like that. So I think one of the mantras that we have, especially like in those first 4 or 5 years, is there's this book by Peter Thiel. It's named 0 to 1.
Yes.
And he has a section where he basically says like competition is for losers. But the point is that you try to dominate a particular element in the market, and then you use the benefits that you get from that, like the excess returns, to go into other markets, adjacent markets. And that's what we've been doing. Like we dominated is a big word, but we were actually like probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest provider of like online R learning materials. And then we used that to go after the people who started to use Python for data science. And so like we used the dominant position in R to grow into Python, and then we made an explicit focus, like, okay, but I still remember the dashboards where it's like, okay, we looked week by week, how many new people do we reach through our Python curriculum? And so and until this day, like, okay, we look at like, okay, how many people are we reaching with our AI curriculum? Those kind of things.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, this guy really knows what he's talking about. I always remember how often they actually changed course with the original PayPal and X, not today's X, but Elon Musk always said something about the letter X. But this guy really, you can say a lot about him, but he knows how to make business. Absolutely.
He definitely has a strong opinion.
Yes.
Which creates focus, huh? Like, there's an argument to be made.
It does, right? All of the founders of these companies, if you in that kind of age category, really had a strong opinion. I mean, also Mr. Jobs, right? He was also very opinionated. But you already said, what sets DataCamp apart is you focus on one topic or one space, and you build it around the learner versus many of the other solutions that come with a here's the video, go and watch it perspective. So from the teaching aspect, how do you actually make this happen? What are the mechanisms you put in place to make this happen? And maybe before that, why did you go that way? What made you think that this is the right way to go about it?
Yeah, so we have a fundamental belief that in learning by doing. So we believe that if people are engaged with the learning materials, they will learn better. And the illustration I typically give is like, okay, what do you rather do if you want to learn a language? But it's the same is true for data science. do you prefer watching like hours and hours of video of somebody like explaining you the grammar in French or in German, which is arguably more harder, or the or statistical techniques, or like how to program something in R, Python, do something in Power BI, or do you much rather like do it?
Yeah.
And so that's how we approach it. Like, okay, so we won't have learning by doing. We have this simple rule: if you take 1 hour of content on DataCamp, 45 minutes of the time you should be hands-on, with your hands on the keyboard, doing things, and then 15 minutes max should be videos. So we really wanted to. Videos are needed to explain certain concepts. I don't believe in like in no videos, but you want to minimize it, so to use them only for what they're good at, and that's like explaining certain like techniques or tool at a more intellectual academic level. And then the other component is we build it in a way that it is frictionless. So a lot of the time when you need to start doing data science and data analytics, like by the time you have your system set up, probably half, if not more, of the people already dropped off. Like you need to install on your computer. It's not a simple click on the button. So on DataCamp, you go to datacamp.com, you fill in your profile, like martin@datacamp.com, this is my password, and you're in, and everything works. So you don't need to like install the Power BI, you don't need to like set up Python on your local machine. So we want to remove all this friction so that people can get to results as quickly as possible.
Amazing. That's fantastic. Yeah, I haven't heard or seen that from anywhere else. That's really good. Now, that makes sense from a learning perspective. Let's come a bit from a business lens. I always look at things from a financial case, right? And of course, you at DataCamp, you also want to make some money. So nothing is for free. When you think about then the business case around DataCamp and why a company should engage and enroll their employees in DataCamp. What would you say? What is the return of the investment, and can you help quantify it for colleagues out there that are interested in the product?
Yeah, so there are two components here, because you say like let's tackle the quantifiable part later, and first look at the at it at a higher level. So on the one hand, that's why I like making that comparison with like computers 40, 50 years ago and email like 20, 30 years ago, because people instantly understand like, okay, this is like, these are tremendous tools, and everyone needed to go at some point to like a learning curve there and understands like, okay, intuitively, like this is the benefit from it. So if you make people understand like data is no more different than email, is no more different than computers at that time, like you make them understand like, okay, this is why we need to educate people. The other thing I tend to say is like, so you have that bigger wave of like there's much more data available. There's a democratization of data itself happening. Like you have today, I'm pretty sure, more access to data than you had in your role like 5 or 10 years ago. So you need people who how to work with it, and I tend to position ourselves also as an enabler of all these things. You have companies that spend enormous amount of money on collecting this data. They spend enormous amount of money on new tools, like whether it's a Snowflake or a Databricks or an Azure or like whatever it is that people implement. Educating people on using it better is just a fraction of the cost, and everyone can most people working in tech can relate to we do an implementation of whatever tool, Power BI, and we went monster it. We put all our dashboards in there. We gave everyone a license. We say big kickoff, and 2 weeks later, everyone is back in Excel.
Boom. Yes.
And no, it's like it's just
so
a pattern. It's so true. And so what we say is like, well, we actually want to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's why you want to use a tool like DataCamp. And then on the quantifiable element, so this is harder. And what we've observed and learned is that different companies measure it differently. And so we opted for a situation where we provide them different ways to measure rather than a single way. So we've seen companies that say, well, for us, it's important that people take one course a month, and we want to measure that.
Yeah.
Others say, well, to me, it doesn't really matter if they take like one course or 10 courses. We want them to achieve this certificate. So we're going to measure number of certificates. And then another one says like, well, I don't really care about these courses. I don't really care about these certificates. I want them to do some learning. So I care about the fact that they're like 4 hours a week or 2 hours a week on the platform and learning. So we want to measure the hours. And so we try to listen like on the other side, like, okay, what's your measure of return on investment? Sometimes they don't know it yet, and we try to figure it out with them together. And then we adjust there. Like I love asking the question, like, hey, if you need to present at the end of the year like one slide to your management or your board of directors on like the return on investment, it's just like you paid this much for DataCamp, like what do you need to show?
Yeah.
And then we work backwards from there. So the quantitative element is case dependent.
That's fantastic. And there's one thing that you said in the beginning that is so true. And I was laughing, but I was laughing because it's so true. And there's even a study from I'm not sure who it is, but I read it in HBR. There's a study. If you take all of digital transformation, and you could argue that data science and data literacy is part of that. Around 30% of the investment is on the technology, and 70% should be on the change management and enablement to actually make use of that. And I think this is also one of the angles you could see it from a benefits perspective, right? The 30% are in fact sunk costs if you don't invest in the 70, if you don't make use of that, which is another. I'm not sure if you know that one, but that might be one very interesting for you. I read a study on how different cultures use data. And the interesting thing that I'm German, as you know, and I love Italy. So that the discrepancy between those two is very interesting. Germans use data to come to decisions.
Okay.
Italians make decisions and then find the data to rectify that.
Okay. Well, you can. What is it called? Like you can prove anything with statistics, huh? So
exactly.
They're good implementers then.
Now that's good. Now coming a bit then to the more today. You already talked about you came a few years back to deep learning, machine learning, and now AI. And my thinking is, we live in a world of AI, and a lot of what we just talked about, I would assume actually AI can do for us, right? If you think about AI, if you use the Gen AI and let it ingest all the data that you have, could not it come up with the right questions? Could not it come up with the answers to your questions? So is Gen AI, cannibalizing your democratization model?
Yeah. So I don't, in my opinion, no, because well, the element is democratization. So if AI helps democratizing access to data, making use of data, okay, that fits with it.
Yeah.
Is it? I think probably the real question is like, okay, is it attacking our business model in this case? So my view is no, because I think I think people need to learn how to work with it. There's always an element of education. I also believe that at this stage, and I think that's going to be true for like still a couple of years in the future, that the actual value is in the combination of AI and the human versus purely everything AI or versus purely the human. And so the example that I love to give here is you have there's the field of radiology. And so in radiology, you can like they look at the X-rays and MRI scans and things like that. And so you can have like they did tests where it's like just AI looks at it, just the radiologist looks at it, and the combination looks at it, and the combination is always the one that is the most powerful. And I actually think that's going to be true for for marketing fields, like the combination, like when you have this creative counterpart. I think for finance is going to be true, for coding already, like see it for development. And so I think we're adding that way, and that means that people still need to learn the skills.
Yeah.
And they also need to learn, like, okay, how do I work now with this AI counterpart that I have?
And that's two good news for you, right? Number one is you have a new field, which is not only learning data science, but learning on how to utilize AI. And because it will be so big, right? AI will be much bigger than just on data science. And learning how to utilize AI in the future is probably another one. Like, of course, you need to not ask someone how to write an email. And maybe in 5 years, of course, you don't have to ask, have you worked and can you work AI supported, yes or no, right? So that's a big one for you, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. So one of the things I'm thinking about now is like, okay, could you see a way? You have this prompt engineering, like how you interact with like a chat GPT. And there are like good ways to do it, and there are less good ways to do it. And so, like one of the things I'm thinking when I'm like driving to the office or driving home now is like, okay, is there something by which you can measure how good somebody is in prompt engineering? Like, is there a way that you can give like an indication around this person actually, like, if you put this marketeer, I always go to marketing, I don't know, like that's why I started. If you take this marketeer and you put them, pair them with an AI, with a bot or something, have they the skills to form a synergy with that, compared to somebody who only like knows basic skills? And so like, this is one of those things I'm thinking, like, okay, is that something that we need to start measuring, and where a company like DataCamp can play a role?
Now, I think then we are clear what's your plan for the next 2 to 3 years. But DataCamp turns like 15 in about 4 years. Do you already have plans? Do you know what will be the field that you're looking into next? What comes after data? What comes after AI?
Sure. So, I think I split it in three things. So on the one hand, there's our curriculum, and so there I think there's still a lot of things going on in terms of new tools that come out. I think on the AI side, we're just at the very beginning. I can see our curriculum being very different 2 years from now. I also still think we're at the very beginning of everything that has to do with data literacy. So if I look at the companies that we're still really scratching the surface of organization that realize, like, okay, we're gonna need to get everyone upskilled on everything data related. So like I still think that there's like lots of stuff to be done there, and I see our curriculum evolving in that way. The second component is around measuring these skills. So I gave the prompt engineering example. I think things like that, things around certification. So I see that part of our skill assessments. I see that part of our curriculum very much evolve as well. And then finally, I see ourselves doing adjacent products. So we have, for example, a product today that's called Data Lab, and it is actually a very easy way to start doing your own analysis by the same simple principle, like you just log in and you can get going. So if you think like, okay, the people that start on DataCamp, they're often at the start of their data journey, and so they're going to need at some point a tool to do the analysis they want to do. Like we want to like deliver them that tool in line with the principles that we've taught them. So 3-4 years from now, like I see ourselves like in those three components. There's an extra layer, and that's actually on languages, as in, so today DataCamp is mainly available in English. We have recently launched a full Spanish version of DataCamp, and I see ourselves like going to Portuguese is in development, German and French is after that. So there's also like a localization element where I think 3-4 years from now we're going to be much farther in. And I wouldn't underestimate like that component, like because people in the tech tend to think like, okay, English is the de facto like language. But if you start thinking about data literacy and you start thinking about like you need to upskill entire organizations, that language element like starts to play a big role.
Yes, absolutely, it does. It's having it in more languages available is definitely an equalizer here.
Mm-hmm.
It would be so easy if you could have everything in one language, but no, I'm living your life every day, and how many languages we need to take care of is amazing. But that's great. Did you ever consider? I think that from what I hear from you, the next adjacent one would be the service. Would you ever think about, okay, we help your colleagues, your team being data literate. We give you a tool. We also help you analyze your own problems.
Mm-hmm. So, as in a true consultancy company, in that sense, no. I actually think that's where AI will play a role, because I think if you what you basically do to a consultant is you ask questions. Can you look into this? Can you look into that?
Yeah.
And that's it. There's a lot of, I'm making this up on the spot, so I'm getting to this insight now. But like I think there's a parallel with like how you interact with a consultant. Is that like you give them data and then you start asking questions like, hey, can you look into this? Can you look into that? Like, what does this mean? What does that mean? How should I interpret it? And so I think there's going to be like automation there. So if you extrapolate that, then the tool, the data lab that I was saying that we're developing, like I would say that is the
next evolution of that.
Yes,
product.
You want to get to a point where people not just see it as I get a bar chart out of that, but as the tool, I get a bar chart, and now I start asking questions like, hey, what does this bar chart mean? And what does it mean for my business?
Amazing. So now we've looked a bit into the future. Coming back to today for my final question. When you think about today, what is your current biggest challenge, and how do you go about it?
Yeah, so this is one of those questions you often get asked when you interview people. Like it's a typical question that the interviewee asks you, and I actually always have the same answer. So my answer is the same, like as it was 3 years ago. I'm actually fairly sure it's going to be the same next 3 years from now. Like, what is important in a business like ours is to have very good people on board and have very good, like, high quality, engaged employees that really believe in what we're doing. And well, finding those individuals is not always easy. And so like the biggest challenge is always like, okay, how can you get your company filled with as many good people as possible?
No, I think this will be a question that will be harder and harder to answer.
Yes.
The longer we go along, it's really difficult.
And it's one that AI can't give an answer to.
No. AI might, to a certain extent, maybe help you of how many of these great employees you need. But you still need them. It stands and falls with them, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm actually like reading an interesting book at the moment. It's called Alchemy, and it's I believe the name of the guy is Rory Sutherland or something like that.
Okay.
He works at Ogilvy, like the famous marketing agency, and he's taking this point around. Well, we frame problems always from like what's the logical solution. But he has this like, hey, there's this whole field of like, okay, if we reframe the context, then it's actually like you look at more creative solutions. Like he gives this example, like, okay, a train ride gets always measured by like how much time does it take from like getting to A to B, and they optimize to like if it's an hour to bring it to 55 minutes. And he's like, that's like just one metric, and people are obsessed about it. And his point is, well, if you think creatively, like maybe it doesn't matter if it's an hour and 5 minutes, an hour and 10 minutes, but people really care for is like how comfortable are they on the train. So if you would equip the train with proper Wi-Fi, with like good chairs, like, okay, wouldn't that be like a more cost-effective solution? So his whole point is that that by rephrasing the problem probably in a way that AI can't do it yet, because AI can probably help you bring the train for an hour to 55 minutes.
Yes.
It might not be the best tool to
think outside
take
the
it out of
box.
context.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I need to have a look at this. I need to look up that book. Martin, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. It was great to learn more about DataCamp. Maybe before we close, how can people get best in touch if they're interested?
Sure. So if you go to datacamp.com and you are interested, like for your business, so there's a business navigation. You click on it, and then there's a way to contact us through a demo form or through an email. And so if you reach out that way, if you mention this podcast, then we'll definitely get back to you quickly.
Thank you. Now I also need to make sure everyone goes there.
Yes.
No, thank you so much, Martin. I really enjoyed it, and I thank you so much for the conversation, because I truly believe in your mission as well. Particularly data science is something that we need more and more people to know about, to understand, so that we can ask the right questions and do something with all the data that we are having today.
It's becoming the next email. Yeah. I'm telling you all.
No, you are right. I haven't heard that metaphor before, that comparison, but you are absolutely right. It is the next email, and we need to work hard. You need to work hard to get it that way. There are quite a few million people that you need to enroll and make ready for the next email.
Perfect.
Thank you, Martin. Have a great day.
Thank you, Volker. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.